Hey, football fans, welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I am Jeff Hartman, joined by KT Smith. Coach, Happy New Year. How's everything going?
Going great. How was your Christmas?
Christmas was good. New Year's been off to a good start so far. Pittsburgh Steelers are winning football games. What else can you ask for, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that makes all the non-Steeler fans out there thrilled right now,
Well, I mean, when you make scoring 30 points in a football game seem like it's impossible, and then you do it in back-to-back weeks, you feel like you got a Christmas gift. And that's exactly the way I feel about the Steelers. But the NFL has been crazy. It's been crazy all year when we think about it from that perspective. And Coach, the one constant, let's get the show off on the right foot, in my opinion. And that is talking about the one constant has been awful officiating, just atrocious officiating. Maybe the tip of the iceberg was the horrible call for illegal touching, I believe was the actual call against the Detroit Lions on Saturday night against the Dallas Cowboys, when now they're saying two offensive linemen reported. Taylor Decker, who caught the 2-point conversion, was not the one that said that he was reporting as an eligible receiver. A little bit of the Detroit Lions, I guess, trying to hoodwink the Cowboys. I don't know, Coach. This is just one example of really poor officiating. What's your take on that play, though? Let's start there. This specific play.
The thing that bothers me so much about that play in particular is what Dan Campbell said afterwards when he said, I went over it and explained it to a T in pregame with them. And that really bothers me because every game, before the game, the officials come to you as the head coach and you go through this sort of laundry list of questions, and they tell you who's going to be on your sideline and what really his sideline policy is and who's calling the timeouts and is your quarterback right-handed or left-handed and your kicker right-footed or left-footed. They want to know all these things because they want to know what to look for. And that conversation always ends with them asking you, is there anything special I should be looking for? Is there anything that you're going to do that's going to require our attention? So if you have a gadget play, if you have tackles over, if you have something like the Lions did where a lineman's going to report as eligible, you go over it with the officials and you tell them exactly what's going to happen. And Dan Campbell said that he did that to a T with the officials in that pregame meeting, and then they clearly screwed it up. There is no, what is Taylor Decker doing when he goes over to the head official there in the game? He is reporting as eligible, and the head official screws it up and then doubles down on the fact that he screwed it up, or doubles down on, I guess, his screw up in the post-game presser. And that's the thing that's egregious to me. A, the Lions prepared you for it. B, you messed it up. And then C, you didn't have the professionalism to admit that you messed it up in the aftermath.
Yeah, that's what really stuck with me, is that now I guarantee he's seeing the footage out there, the all 22 look where you can see two linemen going over, and he's like, well, maybe I got the wrong one. And he's trying to find a little loophole for himself. I get it. He's backed into a corner. He's got to do something because he's probably afraid of losing his job. I don't think he'll ever lose his job. We'll get to that in a second, but still, it's a really bad look for the National Football League when a head coach, and kudos to Dan Campbell for coming out and saying what he said, because really, I think that these players and these coaches need to stand up for each other and state that if this is such a problem in the NFL, then they got to do something about it, and they have to say something. And yes, it might mean you might get fined, but ultimately, what is the end game here? It's been awful all season. We've talked about officiating way more than both you or I want to. Now, I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I've got gambling on my brain as it pertains to the officiating, but still, is there any faith, in your opinion, that the league can actually get this thing right?
There's no faith, in my opinion, because the league has not yet admitted that there's a problem. What do? They fine players and coaches when they bring these issues publicly. And so far, there's been zero accountability for the officials. Now, this particular crew that worked the Detroit-Dallas game, they probably won't get a playoff game. All right, fine. But what their performance in that game has already had a serious impact on the playoff seeding in the NFC. So, I mean, these guys don't make a couple extra bucks because they don't get a playoff game. That doesn't seem to justify the effects of what they've done. For me, the only solution really that the NFL can take moving forward is to make these guys full-time. This got to be a career. This can't be a weekend thing. This can't be a thing you do because you're, like the league is or on the weekends because the league is unwilling to turn it into a year-round occupation. These guys need to be trained year-round. They need to be able to work in other leagues. The game moves too fast. The rule changes have been too swift. It's too complicated trying to figure out what's a penalty on the fly for guys not to be prepared 365 days out of the year for it. I don't think the league's going to take that step, but I think that's the only step that they can take to minimize some of the egregious mistakes.
I hear what you're saying, and the league saying we're going to make these officials full-time would definitely help from an optics perspective. I just don't think it's going to matter. I still think they're going to butcher those bang bang plays because they've been taught to err on the side of caution, which makes a really bad look. I think that they're still going to misinterpret the rules. I think they're still going to have issues like we saw in that Detroit-Dallas game. I don't think it's going to change anything. And that's just my own personal opinion. It's going to help with optics. I think the NFL would be better off saying, okay, every week it is released the players that got fined for infractions the previous week. For instance, George Pickens against the Bengals in week 16 was fined $16,000 for turning and pointing at a defender as he ran into the end zone. $16,000. So if the NFL would just open up their books a little bit and say, okay, these officials, they got docked X number of dollars for the mistake. They own the mistake. Like, come out and say, we realized we made a mistake. It was a bad look. Like, whatever. Say what happened. Don't tell me they got downgraded from a playoff spot. Like, that doesn't do anything. I think they need to make sure. And some would say, well, that's kind of counterproductive for the league. I don't think so. I think that it would give transparency to what's really happening. And if they make a mistake, they're paying for it. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
I just wonder, I mean, first of all, I don't know the answer to this, but I don't know how much an official makes per game in the NFL. And so it can't be more than a couple $1,000 because if there's 17 games in the season, and I mean, let's go high end and say they're paying them 10 grand a game. That's $170,000 for a part-time position. I don't think that it's that much. So let's say they make whatever, $8,000 a game and you fine them $2,000 because they made a major mistake. I think a lot of fans are going to look at that and be like, $2,000, that's nothing. But it is something significant in terms of their actual salary. If you want to make an impact, I think the dollar amount's got to stand out to people. Well, you got to pay them more. And how do you pay them more? You have to make it a full-time job. And so, right, you might be, if you hear, hey, an official got fined $10,000 for an egregious mistake, that might get people's attention. That might make people say, wow, the league's really taking this seriously. But that $10,000 right now is probably more than that individual makes for the entire game. Yeah. So I don't think that they can do that.
No, you're right in that regard. And that full-time stuff will definitely help regulate some of that stuff. I think another part of this is that the officiating is always kind of under this veil, or behind a veil, I should say. I think about when, an official makes a really egregious call that the media say we want an explanation. So they have like a hand-selected reporters get to go and talk to this official back behind closed doors, and then the pool reporters release the transcript to everyone else. It's really crazy. Hey, put them up in front of a pool, put them up in front of the media. Like, that's what they should do.
So yeah, I like that.
Make that guy go in front of the Detroit press and answer questions about what exactly happened. Go whatever, Dallas too, that's fine. Make them own the mistake. And that's something the players have to do, coaches have to do. Why are the officials any different? And they'll say, well, they're part of the shield. I don't want to hear that BS. I think accountability is important, and that would be a step in the right direction. But we don't want to spend too much time talking about officiating. Anything else, Coach, before we move on?
Real quick, you know what we need? What we need is a congressional inquiry. So now we can get one dysfunctional body to investigate another dysfunctional body.
Your tax dollars at work.
Exactly.
All right. Now, the next topic is something I wanted to talk about, and I prefaced this last week. I'm enamored by coaching decisions, and I'm talking about within their own staff. Bill Cowher was on the Pat McAfee show last week, and this was prior to the Cincinnati Bengals Steelers game. And of course, Pat is asking him a lot about the Steelers, and he talked about how Mike, in his opinion, this is Coach Cowher, Mike Tomlin's going to have to make some really tough decisions amongst his own staff. And he talked about how when he was a head coach, he had to make some really tough decisions with people that he considered friends of his. He had to let them go because ultimately he said, I owe it to the team, the organization to win games, and I have to do whatever it takes to get there. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have his own shortcomings, but when it comes to building his own staff, now think about the Baltimore Ravens. You go back just 3 seasons ago. They had Wink Martindale as their defensive coordinator, Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator. And let's not pretend like things were horrible in Baltimore. Outside of their quarterback getting hurt all the time, they were a really good team, a perennial playoff contender, and a lot of times preseason picks for maybe a long postseason run or a Super Bowl berth. And what does he do? He cans them both. He gets rid of Wink Martindale. I wish I knew the guy that took his place. I'm sure you do. And we know that Todd Monken takes over on the offensive side. That's what I wanted to pick your brain with here. Making these changes to a coaching staff, sometimes they're not the popular choice, but they can really pay dividends. What are your thoughts on both Coach Cowher's comments as well as what the Baltimore Ravens have done in the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the comments from Coach Cowher, he's spot on. You look at when you assess your staff in the aftermath of a season, you look at a couple of things. One is obviously, do you still have faith in them in their ability to do their job? Another is, do you have faith in them in their ability to fit into the broader core of what the team needs? A lot of people come in with quote unquote their system from a coordinator perspective. And you say, a guy will come in and he'll say, this is what I want to do. This is what I know best. But if you can't fit that to what the team does best, then you need to move on. And I think what the Ravens realized was that Greg Roman's system, while effective in many regards, was creating two huge problems in Baltimore. One, it was exposing Lamar Jackson to too many shots. And two, he was just turning the football over too much as a result. And so much of that was based out of Greg Roman's philosophy on putting big personnel on the field. The Ravens were 12, 22, 13 personnel team, tight ends, fullbacks, condensed formations, etc. And to John Harbaugh's credit and to the credit of the organization, they understood that if we can spread the field, reduce the number of guys in the box, give Lamar Jackson cleaner sight lines, allow him more space, he's going to be tough to stop. And they reached into the college ranks and found a guy in Todd Monken who could do that, and it's working out fabulously for them. I give them a lot of credit for essentially saying we have a system that is good, but it's not good enough. And we need to in order to take advantage of Lamar Jackson's full potential, fit that system to his skill set. And it was a tough decision for sure. I've had to fire coaches. I fired a guy who I grew up with and a guy who I was tight with. And it was a very similar situation where he had a ton of success. He won a state championship as an offensive coordinator running a certain system. He wanted to bring it to our school. We brought it there. We used it for a couple of seasons. I didn't see it fitting our kids. I couldn't get him to adjust, and I had to let him go because, again, man, his system was successful. It just wasn't successful with what we were doing. And I feel as though that was similar in Baltimore.
It's got to be a difficult, and this is when ownership comes into play as well, because what are you going to do if you go to the owner and say, look, I need to clean house? And with the Baltimore Ravens, when you're talking about them, like I said, it's not like they were the worst team in the division, the worst team in the league. They're still moving the football. They're scoring points. That's tough decisions. Tough decisions have to be made from time to time. And I don't know. I got to give credit where credit's due. And you see some of these teams that, they're firing their head coaches already. There's going to be more fired after the season. There's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made. The good teams typically find ways to make those right decisions. But I don't know, Coach. It's got to be a difficult decision when, and you said you made it yourself. You're friends with somebody. You've worked with them for a long time, but it's a business. And what is it that Mike Tomlin said? Scared money don't make money, I think is what he said.
Well, we're going to see if Mike Tomlin puts that to the test here, because the Steelers have looked pretty darn good on offense the last 2 weeks. Maybe they'll do it again in the season finale against a Baltimore team that's expected to rest some guys. It would be very tempting for the Steelers to say that the new offensive coordinator duo that they have in place that replaced Matt Canada, paired with Mason Rudolph, hey, maybe that'll be good enough for us going forward. Maybe we leave those guys in place and we pick up where we left off in 2024. But that could also be fool's gold. That could be teams that haven't had enough film on what they're doing, on what Mason Rudolph is doing, and Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan, the new coordinators. And you get a whole off season to study it and diagnose the tendencies, et cetera, et cetera. And now that you come back in 2024 and it looks bad again. And now the Steelers have missed that opportunity to find a high-level coordinator. So I really feel that Mike Tomlin's got to take a hard look at what the Steelers are doing on offense. And if he doesn't feel it's sustainable, then they got to move on, even if they've had significant success the last few weeks of the year.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out. Let's go to our next topic. Denver Broncos, man, what is going on in Denver? I mean, not only did the team kind of rebound and come back from the dead, essentially, now there's all these reports about how Russell Wilson was told, I think this was after their bye week, that they wanted him to change and alter his injury guarantees in his contract, which total over $30 million. And if he didn't, they were going to bench him. Well, then he rattled off several wins. How are you going to bench a quarterback when your team's winning games like that? Nonetheless, the situation ends with Russell Wilson being benched. He didn't play Sunday in this week 17. He's not going to play in week 18. And now they're on their way to a divorce. But what do you think about this whole situation, Coach? This is wild to me.
So I was always fascinated by how the Russell Wilson, Sean Payton dynamic would play out. I mean, Wilson, he kind of had an ugly divorce with a players coach in Pete Carroll in Seattle, not necessarily Carroll, but with the organization. And that was an organization that had given him a lot of what he had wanted over the years. And now you get a much more sort of aggressive, gruff, in your face style in Sean Payton, who's determined to overhaul the culture in Denver. And so heading into the year, it was like, wow, this is going to be must-see TV. And it certainly has blown up. If in fact Denver did ask for him to waive that injury money, that'll certainly be something the NFLPA has to look into. I don't know if there's any legal grounds there. Can you do that? Can you ask a guy to basically give back guaranteed money at the threat of his job? I don't know what the lawyerly talk is on that one, but it certainly seems bad for morale. It seems as though if you're the Denver Broncos, this is out now. This word is out. How are you going to attract future free agents? How are you going to attract people to trust you when you sit down at negotiation time, knowing that that one of the most high profile players in the league, they did this to? I think that's a bad organizational look.
Let me get this take from you here, because I find this fascinating from a fan perspective. Right now everyone's like, well, it's a cruel business, man, because this is a business. The NFL is a business. There's a lot of money being handed out from ownership to the league, et cetera, all around. They're spreading it all around. And because it's a cruel business, sometimes teams will do this and they'll say, hey, change your contract or we're going to pull the rug out from underneath you. Fans, I should say, always side with the organization. They always do. Yet when there's a player who says, you know what, I feel like I'm kind of outperforming my contract, I want a new one. Oh my gosh, he's the most selfish player in the world. What a turd he is. This guy's he's so selfish. He doesn't care about the team. He's only worried about the bottom line. When I see teams like the Broncos doing this, which I don't even for a second believe that this is the only time this has happened. It's just a high profile athlete who is willing to stand up and talk about it. No one's taking the side of the player here. Very few are. They're all like, well, this is a tough business. Coach, what's your take on that? Do you see it the same way I do? As fans always seem to support the organization, and yet when the player just stands up and says, well, wait a second, you all are doing this, that, and the other, I want mine, they're viewed as selfish.
Yes, I think that is true, especially fans are passionate about their favorite team, obviously, and you don't want a single individual to hold your team hostage, so to speak. And the amount of money that players are making, it's almost impossible for fans not to see them as selfish when they ask for more. I'll never forget the famous video of Terrell Owens doing sit-ups in his driveway while he was holding out from the Eagles because he believed that the $47 million he was getting paid wasn't enough. And his famous quote was, "I got a family to feed." And I mean, that just people erupted in Philadelphia. You can't feed your family on $47 million. You got to be kidding me, you know? And so he was always painted as being selfish. But Terrell Owens had a point. And his point was this: I'm the 10th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL right now. And I'm the best receiver in the NFL. Or if he wasn't the best, he was clearly one of the 2 or 3 best. And I'm not being paid my market value. And if you took that argument out into society, nobody complains if a top lawyer charges X number of dollars per hour, so long as they get the results. If I'm the top lawyer in the business, I'm going to charge you whatever I want, and you're going to pay it because you need me. And that doesn't translate for whatever reason to sports. So I don't know. Is it because Russell Wilson has shown himself to be less likable than everybody thought over the last couple of years? Do they think he's a diva? Do they think, he's just a prima donna? I don't know. But it feels to me that this is particularly unfair on the organization's standpoint to basically say, we guaranteed you this money and now it's not working out the way we want it to, so we're going to take it off the table.
Yeah, don't hate Russell Wilson in this case. The Broncos can only hate themselves, the man in the mirror that gave them the contract. That's who you have to hate. It's like the Browns with the Deshaun Watson deal. Now, the Browns have to be watching this with a very close eye, because if they're able to get out from underneath this guaranteed money, you better believe they're going to try and duplicate the process to get out of their $280 million guaranteed contract to Deshaun Watson, especially after Joe Flacco continues to light it up. So this is going to be really intriguing to see how this plays out down the road. Could litigation happen? Absolutely. I think it could. It absolutely could. And I know that the NFLPA was already brought in. Russell Wilson said that the NFL was involved. So they are aware of what happened. It's just a matter of whether anything else is going to happen. Where do you think Russell Wilson will end up, though?
Pittsburgh.
Oh, no, gosh. Don't.
That's a great question. On one hand, you have Joe Flacco giving organizations the hope that the right guy late in his career can come in and stabilize a franchise that has a good core in place. I mean, Cleveland's winning because of Joe Flacco, yes, but they also play good D and they can run the ball and those types of things. On the other hand, it's buyer beware with these high-priced veterans when you look at what teams have been able to do, at least in short periods, with some lesser-known individuals at the quarterback position. So I don't know, man. I don't know what the market for Russell Wilson's going to be. I don't know how the contract situation affects future negotiations. It's really going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting because I did hear some reports that Wilson, because he's going to be guaranteed that money, he's willing to pay for veteran minimum next year. He's already going to be getting the $37 million, I believe, from Denver. So he wouldn't need a gaudy contract from a new team because he's getting that money guaranteed still from the Broncos. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Let's talk about a more uplifting story, and that's the Los Angeles Rams, who were 3-6 at one point this season, left for dead. And then they come out and they beat the Giants 26-25. The Steelers beat the Seahawks. They're in the playoffs now. They're in the playoffs. And you know what's funny? You brought this up in the notes. You said, if Joe Flacco is the comeback player of the year, are the Rams the comeback team of the year? I'll say this. I'll go a step further. I think Sean McVay should get some votes for coach of the year, because when you think about what he's done, and he's continued to keep his team together, no one thought they'd be any good. Coach, what's your thoughts on the comeback of the Rams and them making the postseason?
Yeah, really interesting. Great job by him. They're doing it with a young team. They had a great rookie draft class. They've got a great second-year running back in Kieran Williams. It just felt like they were a team there earlier in the season that was caught between two worlds. These aging veterans like Aaron Donald and Matthew Stafford, who can still play, but we're definitely getting up there. Parts of that Rams team from a few years ago that won a Super Bowl, and now maybe the team was in transition, going to turn it over to the young guys, and this was going to be one of those years where they only won 6 or 7 games as they transitioned from one group to another. But McVay certainly found a way to hold them together. I mean, one of the things about a guy like McVay is when you have a system. I mean, he's got a system in place, and that system has proven to be successful, and you can find the right pieces, then you've always got a shot. Teams that are system oriented, and by system, I mean they've got an approach to playing the game that has been successful for them. And that oftentimes requires you just to identify the right players to put into that system. Once you get those guys acclimated, those systems have proven to be successful, and you can kind of get hot like this. And I think that this is what's happened with the Rams. The flip side of that is teams that struggle, who are not system based, who don't have a set of principles or a scheme to fall back on. They start searching and they start looking and they start throwing the proverbial, pasta against the wall to see what will stick. And that's where it can really fall apart. That's what you're seeing, I think, in, like, for example, in Carolina, where they just don't know what to do with Bryce Young. They don't know how to approach it. They're sort of trying different ideas every week, and it's kind of falling apart. So when it got tough in LA, I think McVay leaned into his system, and the young guys got a little bit more experience, and they kind of came along, and now you're seeing the results of that. So there's a lot to be said for the foundation of a great coach, that what they can build and how they can use that, obviously, to overcome adversity.
I got to be honest. I'm really hoping, and I don't know, maybe if you would be as keen on this as I would. You looking forward to maybe a Matthew Stafford return to Detroit in the postseason?
Oh, that'd be awesome. That would be
That
great.
would be awesome.
Stafford versus Goff.
Yep,
Yeah,
that would be
good.
something.
You're not a Goff guy. I know that.
No, he's good in the dome, and he'll get at least one home playoff game. But I don't think he can do it and he'll get you there. He's like Jimmy Garoppolo. He'll get you there, but he's not going to win it for you. Stafford has proven he can win it, but I just think those storylines would be pretty cool because the Rams, that is a comeback story. Like, it's essentially the Broncos if the Broncos actually finished it and got into the postseason.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, yeah, they're done. They're done. McVay's talking about retirement or going into the booth and doing some TV work, and they actually completed it. They finished the comeback. So I think they would be if there was a comeback team of the year, I think they would definitely be up there for that. No doubt about it. Let's go to Carolina's loss. There's a lot to talk about here, believe it or not. Let's start off with the owner throwing a drink on fans. David Tepper has been talked about on our podcast already this season with his knee-jerk reaction of firing Frank Reich, who he handpicked to groom and help Bryce Young, and that hasn't worked out. And did you see the video of him throwing that drink on the Jaguar fan?
No, I did not.
You haven't seen the video? I mean, it's clear that he has a drink in his hand. These Jaguar fans are chirping down below him, and he just dumps the drink over his head, over the glass, throws the plastic cup, and walks out. And so there's people that are saying, like, he could be fined pretty heavily. But I don't know if you had a take on that decision by David.
Well, I mean, this is the same guy who said, and I think I quoted this a few weeks ago, but that, when he goes into a restaurant and he gets bad service, he just thinks about buying the restaurant so he can fire everybody. I mean, clearly he has disdain for the little people, hedge fund billionaire who just doesn't want to hear it from the peons. So, I mean, why would you want to play for that guy? I mean, he's going to write you a check. That's why, I guess. But it's the NFL, blah, blah, blah. But if you could play somewhere else, man, I would think you might want to.
Yeah, or if you're a coach, like, they're going to have to fill that head coaching vacancy. Who wants to go work for that guy?
Yeah, exactly.
He handpicked Frank Reich, and he's fired already. And he didn't get through 1 year with the quarterback they hand selected. I don't know. But anyways, the loss on Sunday clinched the top overall pick for the Bears because they traded that pick the Bears traded the pick for the Panthers taking Bryce Young. What are your thoughts? Way too early thoughts on what the Bears should do with that top pick?
I like Justin Fields more than most. And if I were the Bears, I would draft Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think is fantastic, and pair him with DJ Moore and let Justin Fields have some weapons and grow into that. Because the Bears play decent defense. I'm not picking. There's not a quarterback in this upcoming draft who I'm 100% sold on, who I think is a slam dunk. And I haven't studied it enough yet. This is a little bit down the road still, and everybody's going to start looking at that stuff after the playoffs. But I don't think there's a guy in college right now who says to me he's a can't miss prospect at quarterback. Now maybe the Bears can trade that pick and get a bunch of picks in return, but I think Harrison's fantastic, and I think you pair him with DJ Moore and you give Justin Fields some of the weapons that he needs, he's going to grow into the position.
So this is a turning point for the Bears, in my opinion, and it's all based around Justin Fields. If they like Justin Fields and they think he is that guy, okay, so we're not in the market for a quarterback then. There are teams that are in the market for a quarterback. Whether this class is as good as last year's, that's who cares. there's teams that will always be in the market for a quarterback. And so if I'm the Bears, I'm like, hey, phone's there. Pick it up. What do you want to offer? You want to swap first. You want to give me a first next year. If they do believe that Justin Fields is that guy, then I think they could they might even get Harrison if they were to trade back to 3 or 4 because of everyone that's going to be a quarterback needy team. And they're still able to get weapons, wide receivers. I mean, anymore, it's not difficult to get a wide receiver. Look at what the Steelers have done with some of their second, third round picks that have come in and been players. Like they've been capable players. I don't know if you have to spend the first overall pick on a wide receiver. However, he's really good. He is a really well-rounded receiver out of Ohio State. So, and he did declare, right, Coach?
Yeah, and he didn't play. He didn't play in the bowl game. And
okay,
so it's funny, man. The Steelers, yes, fantastic at drafting receivers. The Patriots, horrible at it.
Horrible.
I don't know where the Bears fall in that. I mean, they certainly didn't evaluate receivers well when they traded for Chase Claypool, but I don't know where they fall in all that. How well do they feel as though they develop guys? I think you're right. If they could move back a couple spots and land Harrison,
yeah,
that would be ideal. Just the notion of pairing him with DJ Moore, who I love as a wide receiver, I think is really enticing if you're Chicago.
Yeah, but again, it's all based on how they view Justin Fields because there's a lot of people that aren't sold on him, and if they're not sold on him, that changes everything. Now you're looking at one of those quarterbacks. You might be looking to trade Justin Fields. Things could get interesting for Chicago, but boy, it's looking like they fleece the Panthers more and more every single week. Yeah. Okay, let's do our player profile this week. You want to talk about Bo Melton? Go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, Bo Melton, probably a guy that a lot of fans don't know much about. He was a 6th round pick of the Seahawks 2 years ago. Wound up on a couple practice squads. Receiver for the Green Bay Packers now, who had a breakout game on Sunday, first 100-yard game of his career, first touchdown catch of his career. And the reason I bring up Bo Melton is he's a local guy, grew up down in my area here near Ocean City, played for a rival high school, Cedar Creek High School, who we play just about every year, and played Bo Melton when he was in school, had a couple great games against their team. Bo Melton is from a really excellent athletic family down in this area. I played against his father, Gary, who's my age. Gary went on to be a running back at Rutgers. His mom was a basketball player at Rutgers. And his brother, Max Melton, is now a corner at Rutgers who is going to be drafted in the NFL. He's a very, very good cornerback. He's got one more year left. But the real reason I bring up Bo Melton is this, man. These are the things that people don't see and that are really worth sharing. One of my assistant coaches, Frank Lasasso, who has been with me for a long time, his son, Frankie, was diagnosed 2 years ago with leukemia. And it's been obviously very tough on the family, and they've had to undergo just a miserable experience. Your 7-year-old, so Frankie's now 9 years old, but when your 7-year-old is diagnosed with leukemia, it's terrifying. And driving him up to Philadelphia a couple days a week for chemotherapy for 2 years, it was a grind on the family. Frank stepped away from coaching with us so that he could just be with his son and go through that experience. And people in this area have been wonderful. And when you know there's a Fight Like Frankie campaign that's going on that's raised a lot of money, but somebody locally reached out to Bo Melton when he was a senior at Rutgers 2 years ago, and just asked, because we'd competed against him when he was at Cedar Creek High School. Hey, anything you can do for the Lasasso family? They were hoping, hey, maybe he'd get him a signed football or a signed pair of cleats, something like that. Bo Melton got the entire Rutgers football team to make a video for little Frankie Lasasso. Everybody on the team signed various gear, whether they were jerseys, balls, and came and visited Frankie in the hospital. He did all of this, by the way, without any media fanfare. He didn't film any of it. He didn't put any of it on Instagram. He didn't seek any accolades for any of this. He did it out of the goodness of his heart because he had never even met Frankie or the Lasasso family. And so, again, man, these are the things in the shadows that I think some of these players do. You hear a lot of bad publicity about guys when they do, unfortunate or even awful things, but you don't often hear about the great deeds that they do. And so I was thrilled to see Bo Melton have a breakout game on Sunday. because he's a great kid, man, great young man. And the things that he did for Frankie Lasasso and for football in this area here in South Jersey are pretty remarkable.
That's a great story. And then, like you said, those stories need to be told more often because a lot of times athletes are painted as selfish and they only care about themselves and nothing is bigger than them and their own cause. It's a great story. Bo Melton, thanks for sharing that, Coach. I appreciate it. So, hey, why don't you, do you have any idea what's coming up on the call sheet this week? I'd love to give you the fans out there a preview.
Oh, you're going to love it, man. We're talking about the dynamic between coaches and referees, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the interaction in both my own experience and then, through what I've observed in the NFL, et cetera, of coaches and referees from pregame to postgame, the in-game interaction, what really goes on between coaches and the officials during games, what kind of gamesmanship exists. What are some of the things that you want in an official as a coach? Some of the things that you hate in an official as a coach. So we'll take a little bit of a dive onto that.
I know lacrosse and football are different sports, but as a coach, like you always knew that line that you could go up to it in terms of communicating with the officials, but you can't step over it. I only stepped over that line a handful of times in my 13 years as a head coach, but I have stepped over that line on more than one occasion. But it's a different sport.
I'll say this. I've never gotten a penalty as a coach on the sideline in football, and that's 30 some years of coaching and being on the sidelines. I coached my son's 9-10-year-old travel basketball team last year. I got teed up twice. So, in football, nobody can hear what you're saying, right? If fans could hear some of the things that you say or that happen on the field, they would be like mind blown. Whereas in basketball, I kind of forgot. Everybody hears it.
I've been I got flagged 3 times in 13 years. So not too bad. It could have been worse. But then you got to tell the players, you got to pick me up. Come on. Like I didn't get ejected from any games because that would be bad. But all right, Coach. Good stuff as always. Thank you for your time. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you on Twitter?
Yeah, at KT Smith FFSN on Twitter.
There you go. You can find me at J Hartman, HARTMAN_PIT. You can find both Coach Smith and my work on the Pittsburgh Steelers on the Steel Curtain Network. Anywhere you get your podcast, search Steel Curtain Network. Also, check us out on steelcurtainnetwork.com. We do appreciate it. Until next week, Coach, have a good day. We'll see you.